This is The Competitive Edge with Oren Klaff. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge so you too can reach your full potential. Thanks for tuning in today. Now let's get started. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Competitive Edge today. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you had to explain to somebody what you do, or maybe what your company or product does? Odds are if you don't live in a hole, the answer is a lot. I remember when I lived in New York City, I felt like every single time I was in a social situation, it was only a matter of time before the infamous, "So, what do you do?" question would come up. And whether we're at the bar or trying to raise capital for our company, every single one of these times we get asked this question represents an opportunity to tell the world who we are and what we're all about. And our answers and the impressions that those make are what determines the type of opportunities that we have in our future, which is why I think this is such an important topic. Today's guest, Oren Klaff, answers these types of questions for some of the most cutting-edge companies every single day. He's the author of the book Pitch Anything, McGraw-Hill's most important business book of 2013, and has raised billions of dollars as an investment banker that helps take companies public. It's a lot of dough. Today, he's going to teach us his unique method of how to present, persuade, and win over the person on the other side of the table. Now, I could talk a whole lot more about Oren, but I figured the beginning of this interview would be a good chance for Oren to pitch himself. Let's go ahead and see what he has to say. Oren, what's up, man? How you doing?
Scott, I'm doing well today. It's another busy one. So, as you said 2 seconds ago, let's light it up.
Let's light it up, man. I love it. I can feel the energy already. And Oren, on this show, a lot of shows, they kind of start off slow. I want to get right into the meat here. And I know that one of the things in your book that I love to Pitch Anything is how people should present themselves. And whether you have a product, you don't have a product, presenting yourself and pitching yourself is something that we're going to have to do, and everybody's going to have to do at a ton of different moments in our lives. So I thought instead of giving a grand verbose introduction to you, you could present yourself to our listeners, and then we could go and break that down and maybe codify some of the key principles there.
Yeah, sure. And the listeners and you guys don't have to worry too much about me and my background. It's pretty simple. I've raised a couple $1 billion from investors. And unlike sort of a team that you might have at Goldman Sachs who raises that much money in a month, or a quarter, I don't do it on a team of 30 people. I do it on my own. And I sit across from investors, look in the whites of their eyes, and I ask them for $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $100 million checks. I regularly meet with billionaires, ask them for money, and get it. And I'm a very traditional, in that sense, investment banker. And I help companies raise the money they need to grow. So that's what I do every day. The reason that I have a book, the reason I am in this interview is rather than go to conferences and take people to lunches and hockey games, what happens in order to find companies to buy and sell, people read my book, hear this interview, and they say, "Hey, Oren, come help me sell my company." So this is my marketing mechanism, and it's much more enjoyable than being out away from my family at dinners with people I don't know and don't like. So that's the backgrounder. But so yeah, on this topic of pitching, what's near and dear to my heart is nearly every day of the week, 20 days a month, I either have to walk into a room, get on a Skype or a phone call with people who don't know that much about me, don't care that much, and starting from almost absolute ground zero, many can't even remember why they agreed to take the phone call or come to the meeting, explain to them who I am, what the deal is, why they should be excited about it, what's happening, and try and leave that phone call or that meeting with having them want and be excited about what I have.
Or you have my attention with your intro, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, well, actually, I should write that one down. As the intro seems to change from time to time. But when you know your fundamentals, you can talk about it with whatever words come to your head. The fundamentals are all the same. So, yeah. So, fundamentally, when you get on a phone call, right? What is it? Those things that you do in the first 2 minutes and the first 3 minutes. And that's what a lot of people want to know. In order to get people's attention, hold people's attention, and get them wanting what you have. And that's, I think, in my experience of having done this thousands of times, it's very counterintuitive from what you may have read, what you may have been taught if you worked at a Fortune 500 or Fortune 2000 company, or worse, if one of your mentors, which is more likely, came out of a Fortune 500 or Fortune 2000, you would likely have been indoctrinated in some really bad habits and bad mannerisms that are likely, when a meeting starts or a phone call starts, to move you backwards rather than forwards. And one of those, and I don't want to get in right off the bat in a conflict with you, Scott, but
I mean, I got my dukes up over here, but I'm ready to hear what you have to say, man.
Well, because and by the way, I like your emails. There's a lot of good stuff in here. I have one printed out that I particularly liked, How to Prevent Prospects from Going Cold, Part 1. But one thing that I take umbrage with, and Tony Robbins is a sort of purveyor of this thinking, I think it showed up in one of your emails, is this idea of rapport, which I fucking hate. Because in the first couple minutes, there's so many other important things to get control of other than rapport. And ultimately, the world I live in, and people may be in different worlds, is high stakes, right? When we go to a meeting, it's serious. There's real guys there. They can make decisions. If we spend a bunch of time farting around saying, oh, you came from Chicago? Yeah, my girlfriend used to live in Chicago. We used to go to the Bears games. When are the Bears going to get a quarterback? Wasn't it cold this year? Yeah, the spring seemed to break late this year. The Great Lakes seemed to freeze a little bit earlier. Wasn't it nice when we were kids to drive trucks across it? Whatever. Nobody's going to buy your deal, give you a purchase order, ultimately decide to invest with you in whatever form because your sister and their sister went to the same college. It's ludicrous, right? Now, so people do that as a form of light orientation because they don't know what else to do, and it works, okay? But it works at the minimum, in a very sort of, it's the least effective of all the things you can do early on in a presentation, and it's sort of the weakest default position is to shoot for rapport. So anyway, those are some initial ideas on, when you get in front of people and get ready to tell them about your ideas, what you have, your products, whatever it is.
So what should you shoot for? I mean, what are like the key, what's like the key point that like I need to get this across, or what's the question you need to ask yourself to figure out like, what do I say to this person in the first 30 seconds, 60 seconds of meeting them?
Yeah. I mean, tattoo this on your arm, right? The thing to shoot for is status, not rapport. All right. People listen to, pay attention, and well regard the things that are said by high status individuals, right? Now, if you think about it, a lot of this I wrote about extensively in the book. There are really three ways to establish status, right? One is wealth. One is power. So wealth, the boxer, who's the guy who just won the fight last night? Mayweather, right? I'm a $300 million boxer. I command $400 million. I have wealth. That is high status position. I have power. I'm the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay, that is another high status position. And the third is celebrity, right? So I'm Brad Pitt. That is a high status position. Those are the traditional high status positions. When Brad Pitt talks, when the chairman of the Chiefs of Staff talks, people listen, And when Floyd Mayweather speaks, people listen. The guy controls $400 million, right? And is a celebrity to boot. So those are the traditional paths to status. But you can, starting from almost nothing, establish great status for yourself by something I call local star power. So you can, without having those traditional sources of status, establish high status for yourself very quickly. And you should do that as quickly as possible because, again, people pay attention to high status individuals. And ultimately, attention is what you're driving for, right? Because I think, Scott, you are the worst, the best salesman, the worst salesman, the most middle of the road salesman, business development guy, executive, startup guy, whatever, can sell almost anything if people are paying attention for long enough, right? I think the problem with most presentations or ideas is that the presenter loses the attention of the audience but too quickly and doesn't have enough time to be convincing. So tattoo on your other arm, right? Attention equals convincing power. So if you can immediately in the first minute raise your status, people will pay attention to you longer than they would have otherwise. And your chances of being convincing go way up.
Got it. So I want to talk about the status thing for a second, because, I'm curious, like a lot of times I encounter people and they come in and they talk about like the castles they've built, all these things that I don't even ask them about. And I think they come off like total tools. And, I guess like maybe it's a separate conversation in terms of like making friends and getting deals done. But is there a way to position yourself where you can still be likable, but indicate the status? Is there a formula for that?
Sure. So there's definitely a formula for different people, different situations. I'll try and give a generic one here that people can refine. So first of all, setting a time constraint on yourself is a very high status perspective, right? So if I were to come to a meeting, I say, hey guys, so this is a meeting, let's say I tried really hard I worked for 3 months to get the meeting. It's with a billionaire, right? And they said, hey, come in or let's get on a phone call. I would start that phone call by saying, and in fact, it's true, guys, I'm really busy. I've got about a maximum of 35, 40 minutes today, right? So what I'd like to recommend, I know we're waiting for a couple stragglers for this call, but the principles are here. Let's get it kicked off now and take advantage of the time we have. And then they'll say, yeah, that sounds good. And then they'll say, so, how much do you know? They'll say, how much do you know about our group and XYZ Capital investment partners? Why don't we start off telling you about ourselves? And I'll say, hey guys, why don't you hold off and tell me about yourselves? Okay. I know you guys have invested in a very, very broad range of companies, products. You've done amazing stuff over the years. And just typing your name in the internet fills the first 20 pages of Google. So you guys are great. We know that. Why don't you hold off and tell me about yourself? I'll tell you about our project, our idea, what we have, and then you can tell us about yourself in context of our project. I think that would put in focus. It will provide efficiency to this call, and we can do the most amount of work in the least amount of time. If you're agreeable, why don't I start? And so, Scott, if you see there, we're doing a lot of things, right? We're letting them, so most investors or buyers get on the phone and they know that if they give the seller 2 hours, the seller will take 2 hours, right? Because we as sellers know that the longer we spend on the phone, sort of the more time we have to be convincing and the more likely we are to sell something. The problem is buyers don't like to be on the phone for 2 hours. They don't like to be on the phone for an hour. They barely like to be on the phone for 20 minutes hearing about something. So you can achieve incredibly high status by providing a time constraint and then stopping people from wasting time and letting them know, how important your time is. And the second you let them know how important your time is and you say, I'll allow you guys to talk about yourselves in a few minutes, you start to gain what I would call frame control over the conversation, right? You're starting to control the lens through which they see you, your product, your company, and your ideas. And that's ultimately what you want, is to control the focal lens through which they see you, so they see the story that you think is best, right? They don't have to make up a story about you from a bunch of information that you're going to give them. So then if you move forward on the theme of how to create high status, I would introduce to you this word prizing, right? So all of this is to build upon the idea, or to communicate to the buyer that you are the prize, that their money is just a commodity, right? Which is backwards from the way most people think about it. Most people think about it is you go into a seller, or you get on the phone call with a seller, right? And their money or their purchase order is the prize to be won. And so you do a dog and pony show to win the prize of their money, right? That's why buyers sit back and they say, hey, tell us what you have. And they let you present, right? And
So
the
true.
job of your presentation is to win the prize, right? So I think following that theme of raising your status, the job is to communicate to the buyer that you are the prize, that what you have is valuable, that your time is valuable. All they have is money, and lots of other people have money. Money is one of the most basic, easiest to get commodities in the world. What you have is incredible. It's rare, and only you have it. And once you leave the call, once you leave the room, once you leave the communication, it's gone, and it's difficult to get back. So they better take advantage of the time that they have with you, right? And so your question, your follow-on question either may be, or it should be, well, crap, right? How do I do all that? Right?
You pretty much nailed it.
So there's lots of ways to do it, but I can give you the easiest one.
Yeah, let's start with the basics.
To convince people that you are the prize and that their money is a commodity, the first step is to introduce to them the idea that the business you're in, the product you represent, the ideas that you have, are happening in a major change or a flux in the industry, right? So if I was going to sell you name any product, okay? Scott, just give
If you were going to sell me a podcasting microphone,
me anything. Oh, Jesus. Okay. If I was going to sell you a podcasting microphone, by the way, which is something I know nothing about, right? So Scott, so what's interesting is we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about podcasting microphone. I know that, this is something that really affects your business, right? Is the quality of the stream and the resonant tone of your voice as it comes through to your listeners. What's interesting today is over the last year, maybe say 2 years, the state of the art in microphones has changed dramatically. What used to be the best of the best 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is no longer the case. Three things have changed. There's been a breakthrough in the size of the microchips that you can now use in audio devices, right? So the device size has come way down, which brings the cost down. Secondarily, the bit rate at which the devices can now stream is up 5 times what it was, a couple of years ago. And last, everybody in the industry has agreed on a protocol. So these 3 sweeping changes have completely changed which devices are relevant, which are the best, what the cost structure is, and it's much more complicated picking a device than it was, even 12 months ago, right?
I really like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I really like this. I'm just thinking out loud here because I think a lot of people just tend to push like features, and you could have just said like, this microphone is 5 times smaller, or it's 3 times faster. But instead, you're kind of like sucking me into this convolution of like different factors and creating this like story and world that is much more intriguing than you just like rattling off features.
Yeah. Hear me out. And I don't mean to sort of be demanding in my voice. The moment that you introduce features and benefits and a value proposition, the only place you can go is price. We all have to introduce features, benefits, value proposition, and move on to price. Okay, we can't elude that pathway, but your narrative has to come before features, benefits, value proposition. Because if you try and introduce narrative afterwards, or the story, or the context, or the frame, or the viewpoint, or the lens, or whatever you want to call it, the cat is already out of the bag. They're already into a price negotiation, and it's very difficult to overlay a narrative or a story over a price negotiation. It's backwards. Okay, so the progression is pretty simple. For the high status pitch, forget about fucking rapport, forget about Tony Robbins, forget about Donald Trump, forget about ABC selling. Zig Ziglar died. Tom Hopkins is 85 years old. Okay, those things are no longer relevant in the new world age. Okay, forget about rapport. The big idea. What is changing? Why what you do is difficult? The problem. Who else solves the problem you do? Right? Let people know that there's, other legitimate solutions out there, and your solution and its uniqueness. What's different about that progression is that your solution and its uniqueness comes maybe 40, 50, 60% into the presentation. Let's say it's a 20-minute presentation. I usually don't get to the solution, features, benefits, value proposition until I'm at least halfway through the entire presentation.
Now I'm curious.
If you just get on the phone and say, like most guys, I just finished my thought. Hey guys, want to tell you about our new microphone. So it's got a chipset that does better sound conditioning. It's got more resonant vocal parameters, and it filters at a higher bandwidth and outputs to the current state protocols, right? And by the way, it's about the same price as the old class, which is not nearly as good, right? And we ship really quickly and bend over backwards for our customers, right? So most people start off with that in the first 30 seconds, and then you go, how much is it, right? And there's nowhere to really go from there, which leaves you control over the conversation. So sorry, I know I hit you with a lot of big topics simultaneously, but this is important to understand structurally how to raise your status, hold attention, and be able to frame how the buyer sees you in terms of what you have and who you are.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, and you totally outframed me there in the beginning, or just keeping the conversation going, and I love it. And I think, I guess I'm curious. Like, I know that a lot of the stuff that you talk about, I mean, it works because you've seen it work, but it's backed by science and the way that our brain processes information. And I want to know, like, what specifically should people be aware of, and if they're doubting this method biochemically and just like the way that our neuroscience works, that actually supports this method.
Sure. So I think there's two things to attack on that front. One is, it's important to recognize I probably see 1,000 companies a year because I represent companies to sell them or raise money for them. So therefore, I choose companies to work with. A lot of companies read my book, hear podcasts like this, and they say, hey, Oren, I'd like you to consider raising $10, $20, $30 million for our company so we can grow. Right? So I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pitches. And they almost all start with the backstory, right? How John and Sam met at college, and they decided to become biochemists together. During their career in biochemistry, they worked with Nobel Prize winner at Columbia Medical School and went on to Johns Hopkins, where they worked in the lab there and invented a sort of new kind of lens which can understand molecules at a higher frequency than previously done before. So they started a microscope company, which then went on to get as its main customer DuPont. Right? And so the story sort of unfolds. It's not a pitch, right? What they're doing is relating the narrative as it is stored in their brain. So there's a great book that, in addition to my book, I recommend everybody. It's called On Intelligence, and it explains how the brain actually stores information. And it's by the founder of Palm Computing. He's a brilliant guy, brain researcher. And so the brain stores information sequentially. Watch. If I tell you, Scott, recite the alphabet backwards from G to A, you can't do it because it's not how you learn the alphabet. If I say sing, row, row, row your boat from the middle of the song backwards, you can't do it. You didn't learn the song that way. So unless we somehow have trained ourselves otherwise, we relate stories, narratives, ideas in the way that it was stored in our mind, which is sequential chronologically. That's why pitches primarily suck if they haven't been planned out, because people come in and they tell the story from the point that it started, which is the most boring part of it. All right. So you got to think about how your story was stored in your mind. It was stored in your mind chronologically, and that's how you're probably telling.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm actually thinking about like all the podcasts that I've listened to and ones that I've done myself, to be totally candid, where it's like, all right, here's the story of this guy's career, and that's going to be the podcast. Instead of like giving me what's going to captivate my attention right off the bat, like you said.
Yeah. So where do you start? Not where you fucking went to college and, where you met your business partner 10, 15 years ago, or the idea you had on me. That is not an interesting starting point. What's interesting is the big idea, right? By its virtue, big ideas are big. What's in them is what you're working on that is high stakes, that is economically valuable, that is moving within a changing industry and has a chance to, at least a better than zero chance of becoming something important, relevant, and a large economic, company or idea. That's the big idea, right? I mean, we've done, by the way, we have a compilation on our website of 12, 13, 14 really, really well sorted out big ideas in almost every industry. So real estate, software, web, philanthropy, manufacturing, light manufacturing, food. So we've done almost every industry. So the big idea is important, right? So, I mean, if we just formed in a minute or less, a big idea, for your podcast, right? It would go something like this. Today, there are hundreds of podcasts across the internet, right? Nearly everybody has one. Your dog probably has a podcast while you're away from work. But most of them are people talking, and the significance is of none's knitting, nearly nothing. If you had a podcast that dug into what makes some of the most successful business people in today's world, who are doing a lot of transactions, making a lot of money using leading edge methods, and if you could interview those people and pull out of them the most interesting aspects of their business that was also doable by you, so you could learn and also do some of this stuff, then you would have a podcast of merit, be worth listening to, be worth saving, and it would be worth sharing with people. That today you're about to listen to that podcast. I'm Scott Britton, and this is the Lifelong Learner podcast, in which we do exactly that, and the economics can mean millions or hundreds of millions to those companies listening, right? So, look, I mean, I just formed that off the top of my head in 60 seconds or less. But you have to agree, at least that's a big idea that sets the stage that there's important things going on here, there's high stakes, and it's economically important, right?
Yeah, I like that. And it actually, I think, fits in nicely with one of the things that you talk about in your book, which is novelty.
For sure. So under novelty, I would say, look, people come to meetings, they take phone calls, they listen to podcasts because they want to hear something new, meet new and interesting people, and get colorful ideas into their mind that they previously didn't have. If you start a podcast, a TV show, whatever it is, off with, hey, I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hour telling you about some stuff you probably already know, right? Then you certainly don't have novelty. You lose people's attention. Once you've lost their attention, you can see the progression. You have no convincing power, and they don't come back. So novelty satisfies the basic need of wanting to meet new people, learn new things, and hear about colorful new ideas that are, paint the world. So, provide some additional perspective on the world we live in. So that's, sort of my fanciful description of the importance of novelty. The big idea has to introduce novelty. I would think, I'll give you another way to try and understand that. So you move from the big idea into what's changing. So if we tie this back into this idea of neuroscience and what's happening with the actual brain, right? A huge amount of the human mind, your mind, brain inside your head, put your hands on your head and sort of get an idea. That's 450 cubic centimeters of cerebral mass. A huge amount of that 450 cubic centimeters is dedicated to change, to detecting change. That's how we survived, right? On the African savannah, so say a couple 100,000 years ago, when we've kind of turned from proto-human into Homo sapien, and we started, we came out of the trees, we started running across African savannah, looking for something to eat, something to mate with, and so, somewhere safe to stay during the night. The only way to survive from one day to the next is detecting change, because trees were not threatening, grass was not threatening, clouds were not very threatening unless they moved. So things that moved were threatening to our survival, and we dedicated most of the maybe 60, 70, 80% of our brain matter to detecting change. So if you don't characterize things in terms of change, the physical nature of our brain isn't attracted to it. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, so let's give another concrete example outside of my podcast, Mike. What's like a deal recently that you've seen where you see things shifting in industry, and that was something that you made sure to highlight?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually, it's a shame that we're not doing a screen share here, but so are you familiar with the GoPro camera company?
Am I ever, man? I love that thing.
Okay, so so that sucks because we are the banker and I'm the representative of their direct competitor, which is a camera called Contour.
I mean, I'm open to better options.
Okay, so the Contour camera, if you type it in while I'm talking, it is a totally different form factor. It's cylindrical.
Got it.
All right. So when the GoPro and the Contour first came out, that was a big change, because it gave people the ability to have a rugged action sports camera and capture, in a waterproof, so capture downhill mountain biking, watercrafting, snowboarding, surfing, those kinds of harsh environments where you wouldn't put your phone or a different kind of camcorder. So that's the benefit or the value proposition of those, right? And so the GoPro, which is a box, if you've seen it, it's kind of like a small shoebox, was a good first entrant into that market. And the market has grown to, about $2 billion of these GoPro-like action sports cameras. Over the last 2 to 3 years, there's really been a sea change in that industry. What's happened is in the first generation, you use the GoPro to get video of what was in front of you, right? And you didn't really appear in the video. What's changed is today it is so easy to mix video. Almost every video by a weekend athlete, a amateur athlete, a professional athlete includes the athlete mixed into the video, because the change is it's easy today to mix video to music. That used to be hard. Today it's easy. Okay. When you see video of yourself wearing the GoPro camera, you look a little bit dorky. All right. It's, for those of you not familiar with it, it's a small shoebox at the end of a stock, right? And it looks a little bit way on the end of geekdom. By comparison, the camera that I represent is the Contour. And the Contour is a beautiful cylindrical shape. I will call this the GoPro is like the PC, and the contour in its beautiful cylindrical shape is like the Mac. And the cylinder attaches to the side of your helmet, and it looks very natural, organic, almost beautiful, as opposed to the GoPro, which is this shoebox stock sticking up off your helmet. So the change in the market in which people want to see themselves in the video, in addition to the footage that they're filming, has really changed the entire market for how people buy these cameras, because they want to look good in the video.
Got it. That's so, I mean, I have a lot of questions after listening to that. And one of the main ones is you made it very, I guess, like very apparent to contrast the existing market leader, or maybe what a lot of people have heard of that aren't familiar with the contour. And I mean, is that something that people should, was that intentional? Is that something that people should focus on when they're pitching, is to outright like compare their products to the incumbents in a market?
So for me, and I see, you know, in your emails too, it's important to create high contrast between what you have and what other people have. And I say this, so in terms of like the investment banking services that I sell, say, hey, look, we do something very unique. If you want a big bank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Houlihan Lokey, right? And you need that brand so you can tell people we hired Goldman Sachs to help sell our company, right? Then that's different from what we do. They have a big brand. They're credible. But you are a $100 million company. You're going to get the shitty C team at Goldman Sachs, right? Their target client is $1 billion to $5 billion. That's who they pay attention to. That gets the A team. If you want Goldman Sachs and you don't mind using the C, D, E, F team, then you go over there and you do that. Now, we're expensive and we're slow because we do things carefully. And when you're selling a company, it's something you only do once, right? If you want the cheap version and you want it done fast, then you go somewhere else because we don't do it cheap and fast, right? And those are the real functional choices within the market. And Scott, you got to check within yourself what's important to you. So if you say, hey, Oren, your head is dead of, you know, your head is full of dead batteries right now. We think your brand nobody recognizes, and we want to have a big name on our deal. Then I tell you, go to Goldman Sachs, do it over there, be happy. Scott, you know, if you think, hey, I don't need the big brand, but I want it done cheap, right? I don't have $2-3 million to put up for this process. I heard it can be done for $250,000. That's what I want to spend. I would tell you, go to the Costco version. I know those guys over there. We'll send you over there with a good referral. Go over there and be happy. But you got to tell me what you want, right? So, and I know you recommend that in some of your, you know, email and newsletters as well, because I read it. So the reason that you introduce the competition is you can characterize yourself in contrast to them, right? And obviously you try and pick the point of contrast is the thing you're great at. So in my case, we don't have a world-known brand, right? We're a small company. And so we have to flush out what the intent is of the buyer. If they want to be represented by a global brand, then I want to get rid of them fast. And so, yeah, I think you have to highlight the competition in terms of strengths and weaknesses. In fact, in my book, the entire last chapter is a case study of doing exactly this in a very, very big, you know, $1 billion presentation. And so that's definitely worth a read because we go through step by step this exact process of picking out the competition, reframing them in terms of the things you can't do, and telling people, if that's what you want, go work with them because we don't do that.
Take me through the process of you deciding which points you're going to highlight and how you're going to position yourself. I mean, is this something where you're fighting for as much beforehand diligence as possible to try to get in the head of these prospects? Or are you just saying, this is who we are, this is what we do, either you're in or you're out?
So, and I want to stick to that question, but this ties back to me to the subject of, hey, get a dossier on your buyer, learn as much about them as possible so you can tweak or refine your pitch, to what that buyer likes. For me, I'm not too concerned about what the buyer likes because we have what we have, right? If you sell podcast microphones, if you sell, you're Dunder Mifflin and you sell pallets of paper, that's what you have. How much tweaking can you do, right? So I think about it like this. The best rock musicians in the world, they get on stage and they give the rock concert that they give because it's tuned to the basic human appeals, right? And they don't go to Cleveland and say, okay, what do people in Cleveland like? Or they don't go to Miami and say, hey, let's put some salsa flavor. Megadeth doesn't go to Miami and say, there's probably a high Latino population in the crowd. How can we put some Latin content into heavy metal, right? They just go and give the music they so if you think about, I would say comedians, right? Comedians, maybe they tweak one joke or two, but basically it's funny if it's funny, whether it's Miami or Oregon or Kansas City or Southern California, right? And so, tying it back to your presentation will work if it appeals to the basic human emotions. You shouldn't have to do that much tweaking to it.
And remind everyone what those basic human emotions are again.
Angry, hungry, and horny. So
you put it so eloquently.
the three emotions of a man, right? Angry, hungry, and horny. I think that's a larger conversation. Maybe we come back here and do sort of pulling the emotional levers of the human mind is a bigger conversation. But, so I want to revisit your basic question, which was so where did we start, Scott? How did we get on this cul-de-sac?
Man, God, I don't know, man. But there is one thing that is just very present with me right now. I mean, anybody who's listening to this, you got a ton of conviction when you speak. You are clearly a confident dude. And there's probably a lot of people out there that are listening to this going, cool. This guy's good at pitching. Obviously this works for him. He's a natural. I mean, is this something that you either have or you don't? Can this be taught?
So what happens, that's good. Yeah. So what happens is people hear me on this kind of podcast and they go, fuck, I believe that guy could pitch the living hell in my product, right? He could raise money for my company, could sell my company, could, because he's got this iambic pentameter, he's got this approach, he understands how to get stats, he does this every day. The reality is that this is a very simple structure. You don't have to talk the way I'm talking, right? You could paint it, you can adapt it to your own tone, to your own style. So I have CEOs that I teach that are Indian, in Silicon Valley, engineers, to use that stereotype, okay? And they give it in a very heavy English accent. They are very patient in their tone and calm, and they're not excitable, and they don't have a ton of vocal intonation. And they have incredible results raising money or doing business development with this same approach. Because unlike sort of Tony Robbins, who I've been picking on, this doesn't require any motivation. It doesn't require any willpower. You can go into it depressed, unhappy with your life, and sort of without a lot of exuberance or attitude. What's important is you give buyers the structure in which they buy, as opposed to the structure which sellers want to sell. The structure that buyers want to buy is pretty simple. We talked about it here. The big idea. What's changing in the market? Why is this relevant? Why, if I do nothing, will I lose? Why is the solution you're presenting me hard to do? What's your solution? How does it work? What's the value proposition? What's the economic upside? What's my downside protection? And who's the team doing it? So you can do that structure in any tone, at any pace, in any language, with any accent, with any form of motivation or attitude, and it will work with buyers because that's how buyers like to hear narratives. So once you have command of that structure, and you can layer on top of that the ability to raise your status very early in the presentation so you can hold people's attention, and you learn how to frame yourself as the prize and the buyer as a commodity, then I think you have a fundamentally transformed ability to tell people about what you have. If that's helpful and in service, Scott, of your question.
It is helpful. My follow-up to that is, so you tell the story, you captivate the attention, you bring status, you answer these questions that we just outlined. What happens next?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. If you think about a traditional presentation that you give, you look for rapport, you introduce features and benefits, you talk about value proposition, then you trial close, right? So what's happening this whole time along is you're walking very gingerly on rice paper, to get rapport, being very nice, telling people about what you have, giving them, the value proposition. Then you go to the trial close. And now you feel like you've imputed enough information to their mind that you can sort of go for it a little bit. Right? And you say, is that something, Scott, that you think you'd be interested in? If I could ship you 3 podcast microphones here over the next week, 1 in silver, 1 in blue, and 1 in red, is that something you think you would be excited about or possibly want to discuss further? Right? And then, Scott, you give your objections. Well, it is. The price is a little bit high for me. I've already sort of bought some microphones this year. I mean, it sounds good for next year. I'm definitely going to do it. It's just that, given the price point, it's something I have to think about. So now you've got an objection, price. Now you start chasing down that objection, hunting down, trying to overcome it, right? So what happens is in the traditional always be closing, ABC, Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins type sales presentation, as time goes by, you're getting more aggressive. And at the end of, say, the 45, 50, 60-minute meeting, you're now really overcoming objections, trying to conquer the prey, trying to take them, take down the objections to get them to buy what you have. You're trying to close, right? And so at the time that the meeting's over, the time that the buyer has been around for way too long, they're burnt out, they're not paying attention anymore. You're trying as hard as possible to close them. And what they want to do is leave. And these things are at odds with each other. So the way I try and do it is I try and be as aggressive as possible in the first 20 minutes when you have people's attention, when they want to be there, when they're excited about the proposition of learning about what you have. You're providing them insight. Once you're done a pitch that's done in the way that buyers like to buy, big idea, problem, solution, what's changing, value proposition, that kind of thing. When you're done that pitch and you've blown them away, because very few sellers organize their presentation in the way that buyers like to buy, you can see what we have is really valuable. You can see why we're so busy. I'm the prize. You're the commodity. And basically your pitch is over. And you can say, I'm so busy that, Scott, if you just gave me, for example, you could say something like this. If you gave me a check right now, I'd have to give it right back to you, right? Because we have a limited supply of our product, my time, and I don't know enough about you. Why don't you tell me what kind of customer you are? Let me learn a little bit about yourself. Do you like, for example, your suppliers to make high margin? Do you value customer service, which is something that's important to us? Do you reorder on a regular basis? I'd like to learn a little bit about what kind of customer you are before I just wholesale take a purchase order and we become partners, right? Because I want good partners. I want the people that I sell to let me make a good margin so I can provide good customer service and I can live a good life. So for example, Scott, if you said to me, I only buy things at a wholesale price and I negotiate very hard, I don't agree to reorder until the last minute, and I like to get things cheap and I use a lot of customer service, I would say, I don't want to sell you microphones. I don't want you as a customer. So I'd like to learn a little bit about you in the time that we have left. And so in that way, you can, with a great pitch, you still have time or a great presentation or a great way to frame your ideas, you still have time to do other things. And those other things include affirming to the customer that you're the prize and that they need to earn their way into your good graces. So then we let the customer spend some time telling us about themselves and why they're a good customer. And then we have a good platform to close from. And basically it goes like this. It sounds like we're a good fit. You want us to make a margin. You're a good customer. We have a great product. Why don't we find a way to paper this and figure out what to do next? We can paper it. You can paper it. Why don't we just say, let's start with 3, right? We have a plain vanilla contract. It's really easy to look at, sign. And if you're amenable, let's just go ahead and do 3 and become partners and see where that takes us. I think we're getting low on time here, Scott, but if you want a way to summarize this and sort of this last bit that I explained, the closing,
yeah, please.
You have to put yourself in a position that takes advantage, and here we'll talk about the fundamental levers of the human mind. People want what they can't have. People chase that which moves away from them. And people only value what they pay for. And so you have to put yourself in a position where those things, the way you're selling or the way you're presenting, those things are in fact true, right? They're chasing you. You've got a price you're not discounting, and they value what they pay for, and you're holding back some things, right? And making them want what you have, because people want what they can't have. So I think that's, you see the whole presentation come full cycle and how you end up closing with very low anxiety, low amount of pressure, and a low amount of energy.
Man, I got to tell you, you've definitely sparked a lot of thoughts in my mind right now. And I appreciate you providing this unique approach that's probably very different and contrasting to what a ton of people out there who are even experienced salespeople have been doing. And I encourage everyone to really go out there and give it a try. Oren, one of the last questions I like to finish off with is something that I ask every single guest, and it's pretty simple. And you know, it's the name of the show. It's what's one thing that you do to get a competitive edge in your business or life. And this can be when you're pitching, or it can be even just as you're trying to grow your current client base.
Yeah. So for me, what's most important is to overstock my pipeline. I can't be aggressive with potential customers. It's very difficult to be aggressive with the potential customers and say, I have it, you don't, right? If you want me, you can ask, you say, Oren, I love you and I want you to sell my company. I want you to raise money for me. And in fact, Scott, if you say, Oren, I like you, or I'm interested in working with you, it's not good enough, right? You have to say, Scott, and make people say, Oren, I love you. I want to, not love, but I love you. I love the idea of what, we really want to do this with you. The only way that I feel confident enough to do that is by overstocking the upper part of my funnel, right? In terms of marketing terms. So if I overstock the number of people that want to work with me, then I can be aggressive enough with the deals that I'm presenting that I'm not needy. Neediness kills all deals. So in order to not be needy, I make sure that my input funnel is bigger and flusher than the number of deals I can possibly take. So that's the one thing that's critical to me, is having a big influx of potential deals.
Makes total sense. What I would love is for you just to tell everybody out there who's listening the best place for them to go to get more information, to get some of those case studies that you talked about.
Yeah, so definitely buy the book, Pitch Anything. It's a couple bucks on Amazon. That is a major body of work that we invested, easily $250,000 writing the book, had cognitive psychologists work on it. It's a body of work that is meaningful. And then the companion material to the book is at pitchanything.com. And there's a lot of stuff there that won't cost you anything and will move you, if you're interested in doing things in a modern way, will move you far down the road quickly.
Oren, thanks so much for your time and all the things you've taught us today, man. I look forward to seeing you during some SEAL Fit.
Yeah, bring it out here. Let's, 75 thrusters, 400-meter runs, burpee push-ups, followed on by sandbag get-ups and a run on the beach. We're ready for you.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to all the conversations, tactics, and mind shares we'll be sharing in the future, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. And while you're there, if you felt like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us a review on iTunes as well. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes, links, and even a full searchable transcript of this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. I also want to give you the details on a cool contest I'm running right now at lifelonglearner.com/fun. By entering the contest, you'll have a chance to win everything from Amazon gift cards to a free month of having your very own dedicated virtual assistant to an opportunity to come and hang out with me and my buds for a few days where we'll teach you how to create your very own passive income stream. To enter this contest and learn more about everything we're giving away, head on over to lifelonglearner.com/fun. All right, guys, welcome to another Mindshare segment. Very interesting interview with Oren. It certainly got me thinking about a lot of things, about how I present myself, about how I pitch products. And I've actually seen Oren's method work firsthand. It can be incredibly effective to establish what we call a buyer's mentality, where instead of you trying to pitch the buyer, you essentially position yourself in such a way so that the buyer is trying to pitch you. And one of the reasons that this can be so effective, and one of the reasons why it was so effective at my last company, Single Platform, is that in an environment where every other person is pandering for this person's attention, it is novel and unique and certainly stands out. This is just one reason, mind you, not every reason. When you come from a place of acting like you are the prize, when you position yourself in such a way so that this other party starts qualifying themselves for your attention. Because at the end of the day, that attention, that approval appeals to an emotional need that we all need to satisfy. But, we talked a lot about sales stuff today. I'm honestly a little salesed out myself. And I had an important thought and message that I wanted to share with you guys that's very relevant to my own life. So although this is a later episode of the podcast, today and the time that I filmed this podcast, recorded it, and I'm recording this now, is actually the day after I launched my podcast. So I wanted to get a bunch of episodes recorded beforehand before I put these on the air. So a lot of the stuff that you hear was actually recorded before it was launched. And yesterday, I had so much to do on the launch day. I mean, it was insane. I was stressed out. I had like a zillion emails and all this marketing activities and then getting back to people, other meetings I had scheduled, and things were going wrong. And, I try to get to the gym 5 days a week. And I also try to meditate every single day and do some of the mind gym exercises that we talked about in an earlier episode with Mark. And I was faced with the decision that I honestly was faced with a lot in New York. And that is, do I continue to work and forego these physical activities like the gym, like these mental exercises that I do, this meditation stuff, or, do I make time for that? And in my old life, I would always do work or career progression stuff over this health and wellness stuff because it felt more important. It felt more urgent. And like if I skipped the gym a day or I skipped the meditation a day, it's nothing's really going to happen, right? Like that's always going to be there. Whereas it felt like there was all these opportunities that I had to take advantage of in my work. And you know what I realized? Like at the end of the day, that is a stupid way to live. Your health, your durability is everything. It's the most important thing. How you feel, your physiology, it affects your work. It affects how you treat others. It affects your mind. It affects all these important things. And for us to forego that to check an email or some random task that really at the end of the day isn't that urgent on a consistent basis, it's just not worth it. So yesterday, despite all this craziness, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do my meditation exercises. Still had craziness today. Still did it. And I just feel so much better about myself. And that's really been reflected in my work and the way that I've approached it. So I guess the message that I'm trying to spread today and something that's on my mind is like, I've really had a shift into realizing that physiology and taking care of your body is the most important thing. It's if you don't have your health, if you're not feeling good on a daily basis, I don't care how much extra stuff you can get done. You're not going to produce quality output. You're not going to feel good. And that's what life is about. It's about feeling good. It's about being happy. It's about enjoying the activities that you do, not getting them done. So for me, I've found a ton of value and peace now that I've started to prioritize, always prioritize this attention to my physiology, to my body, my wellness over career progression stuff. And you know, if you're in a situation where you're faced with this trade-off a lot, I encourage you to give it a try and see how you feel. And all of these emails and stuff that you're worried about, that you've been prioritizing, odds are if you don't get them done today, you're going to be okay tomorrow. And you might be thinking the same way about your gym, but at the end of the day, like, you don't have your health, you don't have your body, you don't have your wellness, you don't have anything. So that's what's on my mind today. That's what has been really inspirational for me and kind of motivating for me to get in the gym every single day. And I hope it helps you on your journey. I will talk to you soon, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Competitive Edge. And that's what life is about. It's about feeling good. It's about being happy. It's about enjoying the activities that you do, not getting them done. So for me, I've found a ton of value and peace now that I've started to prioritize, always prioritize this attention to my physiology, to my body, my wellness over career progression stuff. And you know, if you're in a situation where you're faced with this trade-off a lot, I encourage you to give it a try and see how you feel. And all of these emails and stuff that you're worried about, that you've been prioritizing, odds are if you don't get them done today, you're going to be okay tomorrow. And you might be thinking the same way about your gym, but at the end of the day, like, you don't have your health, you don't have your body, you don't have your wellness, you don't have anything. So that's what's on my mind today. That's what has been really inspirational for me and kind of motivating for me to get in the gym every single day. And I hope it helps you on your journey. I will talk to you soon, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Competitive Edge.